Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new to my channel, my name is Michelle and I do all things makeup related. Today's video is actually going to be a book look. This month's book look is going to be on Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth. And the book look series, if you're not familiar with it, is something I do on my channel where I read a book, one per month. And the last Thursday of every month I do a review and give a summary, while I also do my makeup in a way that kind of relates to the story. So today's look I'm going to try to do something a little more like orangey and fiery, with a little bit of graphic liner, or at least I'm going to attempt to do some graphic liner. There was nothing in this book that was specifically makeup related or anything like that. The only thing, like even beauty related, they did mention one person in the group, one of the chosen ones, wears a lot of makeup and is like one of those like Instagram influencers, Instagram celebrities. So she does a lot of makeup, but nothing like in particular. So without further ado, let's dive into this book and get this look started. All right, so this book kind of has like 3 different timelines in a way. It takes place in like 2019, 2020, something like that. And so the first kind of timeline is in 2009 and 2010, which is when this Dark One emerges. And this is the villain throughout the entire story. And he came about, and for somehow he has magic, and he's using it to destroy cities and destroy people. What he does is he kind of creates a vortex in the middle of a city, and it just brings in all of the people and all of the buildings and all of the scraps and just turns it all to dust. So they call these things the drain sites. So when this all starts happening, they discover that there is a prophecy that talks about people who would be able to fight the Dark One and save the world. So these people are then called the Chosen Ones, and something in the prophecy states that this person will have lost their father and will have lost a brother or a sibling. So it turns out that there's actually 5 people who fit that description, and Eris, which stands for something, but I don't remember what exactly. It's kind of like their government official or their governmental task force that has to deal with things that are super normal, meaning magical and things like that. So Eris goes out and finds these young folk who the prophecy seems to be talking about, and they end up being the chosen ones. So they are 5 teenagers, and they get to learn all of these different tasks and all these different skills to help them combat the Dark One and survive this. And so they are the only ones that the government knows of, at least, that can harness magical powers and use magic on Earth. So this timeline is not the main timeline. All the events that happened in the past are all kind of exposed gradually throughout the book in flashbacks or memories, or just in descriptions about things that have happened to the group. So I guess I'll go in what has happened. So there are the 5, like I said. The first one is Matt, and he is someone who ends up being the leader of the whole pack, and he just seems to be the one that has like the heroic nature about him. And then we have Esther, who is the one that is famous on Instagram, and then Inez, I think is how you say Inez. They didn't really mention a lot about Inez. She wasn't really in the story all that much. And then Albie, who is kind of like the quieter guy. And then Sloane, she's the main character, and she's kind of the person, she's not very personable, and she's kind of a rebel, hard-hearted, things like that. But for some reason, she and Albie get along really, really well, and they just kind of understand each other in a way that no one else in the group kind of does. Eris discovers that there are a couple magical items from myths and legends that are actually real and are probably placed somewhere on Earth. So they first track down all of those magical items, and each chosen one has their own specific magical item. And Sloane's is a needle of some sort. I don't even know how to like pronounce the name of it, so I'm not even gonna try butchering that. But her needle, I don't really know what it does, but they discover that it is buried at the bottom of an ocean. So they go, and she learns how to deep dive and goes with a whole scuba team, and they get down there, and she can feel the pull of the needle with the magic. She can just feel it all over her, and she reaches the needle and all of a sudden can't really control her magic, and it just kind of explodes throughout the water and throughout the area and ends up actually like obliterating all of the other divers and other people on the team, people on the boat. So a whole team of people from Eris have now perished because she just couldn't control her magic once she touched the needle. And then the needle also did something else to her, and it embedded itself in her skin. So it made itself a part of her, and she didn't know what that meant, neither did Eris, but they didn't know if removing it would do anything magical, or how things would be affected. So even though she pleaded, the Eris people did not choose to remove it. So she took things into her own hands and bit it out of her hand. So now throughout the whole story, she has those scars to remind her of what happened. And then there's something else that's really important. Sloane and Albie actually got captured by the Dark One for 24 hours, and there's nothing really like super special about that. They just were the ones that ended up getting captured, and they were tortured, and it came down to the Dark One going to Sloane and telling her to choose who would be the final one to be like actually tortured. And it was either, her, it was such intense torture, either between her or Albie. And she decides Albie. So he ends up getting tortured so bad that he is almost paralyzed and has spinal fractures or something like that. So she definitely feels bad about it, because Albie was like her best friend and the person who really understood her. So after he gets tortured, they find their way out and they find their way back to the team, and they come up with a plan to kill the Dark One. Since the kidnapping, they realized that the Dark One kind of has a special draw to Sloane. And so they decide to use her as bait and kind of drag him out of hiding. So the Dark One's like main lair basically is Trump Tower. Beautiful, like, use of play there. Anyway, so Trump Tower is really his lair, and he comes back from it, is walking towards Sloane, and the other chosen ones kind of ambush him. He is taken down. The Trump Tower falls into Lake Michigan with the Dark One inside, and they all just start celebrating. The Dark One's dead, they defeated him. So now the book actually starts 10 years after that, and it's on the 10-year anniversary. And it's just all the 5 of them getting ready to go to these celebratory events. They're unveiling a monument in Chicago. So you kind of get more information about where they are today. And Sloane and Matt have actually been dating for those 10 years. Esther went to go live in California, so now she's super famous, Instagram famous. And the other two just kind of hang out. So that's where they are at this unveiling ceremony, and they see the monument, and it means so much to them, and they're first ones who get to go into it. And then from there they go to like an after party type of thing. And at this after party, Matt proposes to Sloane. And like I said, Sloane is kind of like hard-hearted and just not really well liked. And Matt is actually the heroic one, so he is very much well liked. And so people just don't see their relationship as real, and so Sloane just kind of went along with it and agreed to marry him, even though she knew deep down she didn't really want to. So after they get engaged, everyone kind of gathers around to celebrate them, and Sloane eventually finds her way out with Albie, and they go to a nearby bar, and she just gets wasted, which doesn't make Matt happy, obviously. And he can't really talk to Sloane about it because she's, again, just so like hard-hearted. It's very hard for her to have those conversations, and she kind of avoids that as best she can. So that next day, as she's like super hungover, an Eris agent actually comes to visit them, and she says that they need to go to the Eris base, the headquarters, somewhere in Chicago. So they head over there and make their way over there. And when they get there, Sloane feels again like this draw of energy, this draw of magic. So the Eris people tell them that they have developed some sort of machine, an instrument, to help channel magic, to help them better understand the world. And the reason that they're doing this is because there's a lot of odd things happening in the world. There was a video in like Australia or something of this girl who was falling up into the sky and like disappeared, and they don't understand why. They don't understand how the reversal of gravity happened. So far, really only the chosen ones are the ones who have magic. So they're really concerned about how and why this is happening. And then there was also an instance where they found a farmer that was in his like combine thing on his farm, but the farm was, or his field was actually underwater at like the bottom of one of those really deep oceans. So again, they just really were curious as to what was going on. So they decided to channel some magic, but they couldn't really get the machine to work. They haven't really tested it. So they wanted the chosen ones to be the ones to test it because they're the ones who can actually control magic. Albie was really the only one who was interested in it, and he agreed to stay and test it with them, but everybody else kind of left and were kind of concerned for Albie, but didn't really think too much of it. And then the next day they get informed that Albie dead. He did return back home, but he had overdosed and killed himself, and he'd written an apology letter, and so that just kind of broke Sloane even more. She called off the engagement, and it was just a whole lot she was going through. She had to be the one to organize the cremation and the funeral because she was kind of the toughest one and the one who could just handle it, and she knew exactly what he wanted. So that was what she was doing, and they finally get to his funeral and the spreading of his ashes. This is where we get into that third timeline. So while they're at the funeral, Sloane feels a tug towards the water, and she hears Albie's voice saying like, "Come here, let's go," things like that. So she knows that he's dead, and she's not trying to like deny the fact, but she knows something is up. And all of a sudden she starts feeling a pull again, and so she gets pulled into the water actually. And when she finally comes up for air, she realizes that she's in a different place, still somewhat Chicago, but she's kind of confused as to where she is. And she sees these two people standing at the water's edge waiting to greet her. And of course, you know, she's very confused as to where she is and why she's there. And before she can ask those questions, Matt and Esther actually come up from the water too. The people that are waiting for them at the water's edge finally say, "We are from a different dimension. We brought you here because we know that you successfully defeated your dark one in your dimension, universe." Well, it turns out they also had a dark one that they were not able to defeat. So they were bringing in these chosen ones from Earth to see if they can defeat it for them. And all three of them are kind of upset by it because of course they don't want to go through it again. They've already been through it once. They've already saved who they said they needed to save, and they just didn't know if they could go through it. But there is something different about this world that is not in their dimension, and it's the fact that everybody knows magic, and everybody has magic, everybody knows how to wield it. They have these things called siphons that help them project their magic onto items. The architecture in Chicago is a bit different because it is now influenced by magic. So now they have to understand this whole new world and understand how to channel magic through the siphon. And they are told that the Dark One in this universe is referred to as the Resurrectionist. He is referred to as that because he actually has resurrected some of the dead army from the dead, and now uses them as his army, and they're like a zombie army. So it's kind of weird, but that's just the way it is in this dimension with this Dark One. So Sloane is having trouble adjusting to this new world with magic. She's not a huge fan of magic because she knows how destructive it can be, especially with her magical weapon being the needle and the first incident she had with using the needle. So in order to kind of calm down, she leaves the building and is escorted with a military officer. She goes to the museum because that's kind of where she would be in Chicago. She just found solace in the museum, and as she's there, she gets kind of sucked up into the ceiling and is just kind of stuck there, and someone comes up and helps her down. He just said it's kind of a prank that people like to play, like it's, you know, easy to get you down, let me help you. So he does, and he introduces himself as Mox, and they kind of start bantering and start to get along fairly well, and he invites her to a bar that he works at, saying, you know, if you ever want to chat again, like, this is where I will be. So she obviously doesn't tell him that she's from a different dimension because no one's really supposed to know that. So she tries to keep that as secret as possible. So she eventually tells Esther to come with her, and they go to the bar and they meet Mox and they have a couple drinks. But he kind of starts asking questions, and because they're not really from the world, they don't really know how to answer them, and they say something that kind of leaves him questioning them and giving them kind of weird looks. So they stop talking to him and leave the bar. And Sloane now has plans to never talk to him again just because she knows she kind of messed up and said something weird. So they head back to the training facility, which is kind of like the magical headquarters of Chicago. So their instructors at this facility, their names are Ayla, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and Nero. Ayla seems to be just as hard-hearted as Sloane, and she's kind of the boss lady, whereas Nero's kind of her subject and is nice to them and is talking Sloane through things, trying to figure out why she can't perform magic with the siphon. Those are kind of the people that we're introduced to. They go out for another outing, and I think it's just Esther and Sloane. While they're out, they come across the Resurrectionist, come across one of his drain sites, which is those sites where everything just turns to dust. Sloane gets captured. She's brought back to the enemy's headquarters. She's questioned a little bit, but left in her little cell room thing. She tries to find an escape route. She pulls the planks off the window and runs out of the building, jumps off the second or third floor, I can't remember, breaks her ankle, gets into a cab, and finds her way back to the magic headquarters. Clearly, they're all relieved when they see her, knowing that she's alive. So she goes to Ayla and Nero and tells them all that she knows, everything that happened to her, everything that she saw or experienced with the Resurrectionist and his army of the Walking Dead. And they kind of call her back after that and say, we were kind of concerned because you seem to have a sort of sympathy for him. And she's very confused by that. She didn't understand why they would see her as sympathetic with someone who kidnapped her. So she just kind of says, well, I know he's not our Dark One. He's nothing like the person that we had to fight. So in that sense, she just felt like a little bit more relief maybe, but she still finds it a bit odd that they asked her that. And while she's in that conversation with them, they kind of guard her against her feelings towards the Resurrectionist. Again, they know that she's, against him still, but they said that the past chosen one, who they this time referred to as a she, whereas before they referred to him as a he, that she had trouble staying put, and so they put her on surveillance. And at this point, Sloane gets a little curious. She realizes that they must have made some sort of slip up, right? That there's no way they mixed up the pronouns of their past chosen one. So she gets a little suspicious and starts talking to Esther and Matt about it, and they agree it's a bit suspicious, but kind of tell her to stay off of it, nothing's gonna come of it, and that they should trust these people. So Sloane, while she's recovering after her fall, she decides to start reading books about magic, and she's reading them outside of Nero's office. He notices that she's there, so he kind of tries to avoid her as much as possible. And she notices that his office is super secure, it's locked physically and magically, so he's definitely putting some extra precautions in there. So she's really curious as to why. And eventually she's able to convince Esther to break in his office with her. And they end up finding a bunch of his journals, and it documents his travels to and from other dimensions, as well as taking chosen ones from those other dimensions. So clearly he had been lying to them, and they confront him about it when he actually comes into his office and busts them. He then reveals that yes, he did take chosen ones from other dimensions and other worlds, but still every single one of them have died. So they ask which number they are, and they're actually the 5th chosen one to be brought to this earth dimensional earth to defeat the Dark One, Resurrectionist person. So Sloane is still concerned that they're lying to her, but she kind of feigns trust in them and says that they are going to do this whole new plan. It worked last time for her to be the bait, and so they thought that they would do it again this time. So she goes off plan and goes and visits the room of the Resurrectionist. She wants to take him by surprise and ask him a few questions. So she does, takes him by surprise. He's cooperative and answers her questions. They both kind of have a respect for each other. So her curiosity is taking her over. So she just wants the truth. And she starts asking him all these questions, and he says that he knows the person prophet who made that prophecy about all of the chosen ones. So they go and visit her in St. Louis, and she just kind of talks about magic and how they both have magic, so much magic, and all of these things. And it kind of becomes, it kind of reveals itself to her that Mox is obviously not, did I say that already? Yeah, the Resurrectionist is Mox, if I didn't say that already, but I think I did. So obviously she knows Mox is not the Dark One from the prophet, and they try to figure out who it is. When they get back to the lair, Nero had left a package for Sloane, and what it was boots, a pair of boots that she had worn in her dimensional Earth that was taken from her by the Dark One. So then she connects it and knows that the Dark One is Nero. So now she gangs up with Mox and his army of the undead, and they decide that they're going to go investigate more and see if they can find something to bring Nero down. Mox was actually the chosen one of this other world. He was trained by Nero and was given siphons by Nero because Mox's magic was just so out of control, and one of the siphons they used was a spinal siphon, which isn't normal. The person who puts the siphon on this subject is the one who can control the magic of that subject. So Nero has control over Mox if they get too close to each other. So they kind of get caught, and Matt and Esther are there trying to figure out what the truth is, and Sloane's trying to explain it. Nero comes in, takes over control of Mox, and reveals to Sloane somehow, through memories or something, why he is doing what he's doing, what his whole life story is. So basically he's immortal, and it's his duty to hold Genetrix, which is this dimensional world, apart from Earth, because they are on a collision course, and he's the only one who can hold them apart, but he's breaking at the seams. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He just wants to die, but they know that if they kill him, then the two worlds will collide, but if they don't kill him, then he's still going to be doing all of these bad things. So it's kind of a dilemma for Sloane, but she realizes what has to happen in the end, and it is to kill him. So she does. After Nero dies, they kind of wake up, and both of the worlds have actually collided. So half of Chicago is Genetrix with their different architecture and magic, and then half is the Chicago that they had left that's just normal, like Earth Chicago. So now Sloane is there in a world that she had made. She had gotten rid of the things that she didn't like her and Matt's apartment is now gone, and just a bunch of other things that she didn't like, but it still keeps both worlds together. So now Earth is kind of in an apocalyptic state because no one really knows what's happening, and like there's now two different currencies, and it's just also confusing. So it kind of leaves off there with Sloane leaving with Mox to go see if her mom is still alive, and it just ends with apocalypticness. So I did my best to do a full summary, but I actually had a hard time reading this book, to be honest. I was so excited to read it because I love Veronica Roth, because she wrote the Divergent series, and I absolutely loved those books, but this book was not for me. I did like a couple things. She had like top secret documents between chapters that helped reveal what happened in the past and who these different characters were and how the government kind of talked about the Dark One and the situation. There were newspaper clippings, so it was really interesting to see all those different sources to give you information. It wasn't just the story itself, so I liked that aspect of it, but I just think there was way too much in this story, way too much going on, that it definitely could have been like 2 or 3 different books. I think that it would make sense for the first book to talk about the actual happenings when they were teenagers in the Dark One. That would have been great to just have it all fleshed out and like actually understand that story and their relationships. And then the second part being, oh, you know, he could potentially still be alive and they get sucked into this other world. I think having it all in one book was just too much, and it just made it kind of not a very enjoyable read. I definitely did like the storyline. I liked the whole dimensional separation and the magic that was involved and the kind of revealing who the Dark One really was. I think that was done well, but I just think that the story could have been told in a different way that would have made it a lot more enjoyable for me personally. So I was a bit sad about that, but all in all, I do think it was a good book. I basically told you everything that happens, so if you don't want to read it, like, don't waste your time. But if you do still want to read it, because I know that there's still a bunch that I left out, and you may even find out that it's something that you like to read, so don't just take my opinion on it, but do with it what you will. The book for next month is going to be The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and I actually have read this book before, so I know that I love it. They also have a Hulu series on The Handmaid's Tale. I believe the first season relates to this book, and then everything after that isn't related to the book. But I have this book, and then I do have the second book too, but that I won't read until July. So this is our June book for our June book look. This is the look I came up with today. Got the little graphic eyeliner thing going on. Looking pretty good. I mean, there's nothing that relates really to the book, but I don't know. They have eye siphons, so I figured maybe doing something graphic eyelinery would help kind of make it look like a little bit more futuristic. I don't really know, but let me know in the comments down below if you read this book, if you plan to read this book, if you don't, based on my summary, but just kind of what your thoughts are on my summary. Give me all the details. I absolutely love talking about books, so go ahead and sound off in the comments. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are not already. That is all I have for this video, and I will see you in the next one. Like they, there was the whole, they had a little